I stepped to the little wood podium in front of the circle of chairs. I'd always hated public speaking from my early days in speech class while in junior high. My knees were shaking, and I was afraid my voice would break. Looking at the 12.5 men seated, I took a deep breath to settle myself and began. "Hello, my name is Gary," I said as an introduction. With a slight pause to take a breath, I continued, "And I am a cold." I waited at least 20 seconds while I watched my audience for their reaction. Most seemed startled at my statement, their expressions ranging from incredulity to just blank stares, but not a single man smirked at my initial self-deprecating admission. Well, not really. To have that brand on me angers me off to no end. This is my second meeting, and I have listened to a half dozen of you tell your stories, so I decided to share mine. Unlike most of you, I am still married. My lawyer advised me to get counseling for anger control while we worked up my divorce case, and I got my duckies in a row. So far, it seems to be helping. At least I haven't killed anybody yet. This was met by smiles and soft laughter. Before all this started, I did not think I was a gullible man. I had no idea I was unobservant. I honestly thought I was a loving husband, and hopefully soon a proud father. I never considered myself a victim, nor did I ever think of myself as a loser. I was never the one on top of anything I did, but I was up there in the also-rans, or those who came close. In high school, I was in the top third of my class academically. The same goes for college. I graduated with a solid 3.4 GPA, more than enough to get into graduate school where, once again, I did fairly well while I worked as an accountant. Upon graduation, and with a little more experience under my belt, I got a good job as a CPA and thought I was on a solid track to success. Then I had the rug pulled out from under me. Academic and then financial success is one thing, but to have the one thing that defines your core ripped away is the worst a man can face. For your wife to tell you that you are not good enough for her, well, maybe not directly and verbally, but rather in deed, is devastating. I began to hyperventilate. I grabbed that little podium and held on like it was a life raft in a choppy sea. "Sorry, I got a little off target there," I said as I regrouped. Two men in the front row gave me a thumbs up and a nod to tell me they understood and for me to keep going. "Let me backtrack," I said. "I'm not going to start telling you how beautiful my wife is, how big her breasts are, and all that. I'm not going to describe our intimate life and claim it was super hot, and we had daily. I will say we were active in bed and seemed to have a great life outside of the bedroom as well. She was my best friend and my life partner, or so I thought. Ava and I met in college the semester before I graduated with my bachelor's degree. We hit it off and married that next summer. I got a decent job right away as an accountant so I could afford to pay for her to finish her degree. Then after the year of work experience I needed, I went on to get my CPA while Ava became a paralegal. Lately, she has announced aspirations to go to law school. I snorted. "Good luck with that. I will not be the one paying for it." That got a few chuckles from the audience. With 2 sets of college loans, we held off having kids or even buying a house until we both felt comfortable we could afford the expense. Last year, after 5 years of marriage, we bought an older 4-bedroom home and I completely remodeled it. I gutted the interior to the studs and even changed up the floor plan to suit us. I turned it into just what Ava and I envisioned as our future home. My older brother is a contractor who specializes in remodeling older homes and turning them into the dream his clients envision. I worked for him every summer while in school, so I felt I had the abilities needed to gut a house and rebuild it to make it the best it could be. My brother helped me when I began, and even got his subcontractors to give me special rates for those things outside of my own expertise. Of course, several of those contractors were already my accounting clients, so part of the work was quid pro quo. In other words, I don't have a whole lot of money tied up in the house itself, but the value if I sold it now would be triple what we have invested in it. Ava got her dream home and seemed thrilled and content. 6 months ago, she announced she was ready to get pregnant, and it only took 2 months before she disclosed she was with child. I should be over the moon, and at first I was. The thing is, the baby is not mine. Or at least I am pretty sure it is not, and at this point in time I sincerely hope I am right. I'm not exactly sure how long my wife has been cheating on me, but looking back, I suspect off and on for much of the past year at least. She had ample time to stray while I busted my hump working as an accountant and renovating our future home evenings and weekends. Now I'm sure many of you wonder how I found out about Ava's activities. I got several nods. Nothing like some of you guys. No late nights, quick showers when the woman came home, guys' underwear under the bed or anything like that. It started with a simple phone call. I overheard her talking to someone on the phone while she was in the bedroom and thought she was alone. She and whoever were talking about what to pack for an upcoming business trip. Hearing Ava's side, I surmised she was talking to a woman. What caught my attention was when Ava said something about how the woman should bring her big strap on and how she might not be able to take a really rough for too much longer. She said something like, "Yeah, I know you told me I can get messed hard until just weeks before I deliver, but this is my first kid. I have not popped out two already like you have, and I'm not sure how much longer I can take your toy in my body with Doug's involvement at the same time." Now I know Doug is her boss's first name. She continued and laughed. "Oh, hell no. No way am I gonna let you use that big toy on my back. It stretches me enough as it is. I have to do extra Kegels so Gary doesn't wonder why I am loose when I come home after you finish using it on me. And when I am away a week and take that thing every night, I know I am stretched out. I had to pull out my toy and put on a show for him last time so he didn't get suspicious. He thought I was just getting warmed up for him. Of course, I am doing Kegels daily to keep tight. Doug is barely as big as Gary, so no worry there, but that toy is huge. Of course, I love it. Damn, girl, you know that. But this baby bump is really starting to show. I'm gonna have to start buying prego clothes soon. Nope, I still haven't got myself tested. I'm a little nervous that it might be Doug's kid. Oh yeah, he's been with me many more times than Gary in the past 6 months, and the timing aligns with that meeting in New Orleans. Plus, Gary was coming home too late at night and too tired to really have intimacy with me like I wanted around then. I was at my most fertile time. I'd just tell him to lay back and enjoy. He's never caught on. I saw a series of grins around the room. Okay, I know some of you are thinking I am making this up. I could not possibly remember a conversation with that much detail, especially if I was upset. Well, I've listened to that conversation dozens of times in the past few weeks. I recorded it on my cell phone, I said. I saw a few nods and expressions change from obvious skepticism to acceptance. I called a security guy my brother uses for help. He installed a couple of cameras and recording devices, plus provided a few I could put in her purse and briefcase. I caught her in my bed a few times while I was at work and had some interesting audio conversations. She is being intimate with both her boss and the secretary, often at the same time. The secretary is married with a couple of kids. From what I gather, they do when they can, and the boss often does one or the other women at work. Sometimes the women play. You gotta wonder how they get any work done from the sound of it. I want to bring up one thing the doctor asked me. He asked me to try to get into Ava's head so I could understand her motivation to step outside of our marriage for intimacy. Perhaps she was frustrated with our long hours apart, and she needed some physical and emotional contact to make up for it. Well, I'll tell you all the same thing I told him. I don't care. She cheated. Simple as that. If she was feeling lonely or excited, she could easily have said something, asked for a little more us time, but she didn't. She decided to go off and cheat. The reason is moot. Okay, that's about all I have. Thank you for letting me vent. I am in the process now of divorcing the cheating woman. She left this morning for another out-of-town meeting with some corporate client. And yes, the boss and secretary are going. I concluded my talk. Before I stepped away from the podium, one of the men, a big grizzled guy, spoke up. Why didn't you go stomp a mud hole in the guy's back? Of course, I have no idea who did it as I was not there and had a good alibi. But the guy who was messing with my ex got his jaw broken and his nuts stomped flat. Nobody saw a thing. Random attack according to the cops. There was laughter all around. I told them I had not even confronted the soon-to-be ex-wife yet. I was still in the process of making plans. I got some incredulous looks. The main reason I am even here at these meetings is to keep a lid on my rage. Oh, I can tell you I have imagined using a baseball bat or even putting a few bullets in Dougie's back, but I am not about to risk jail. And that macho crap of standing up and fighting for my woman like a man is just that crap. She is not my woman if she doesn't want to act like it. Another guy asked if after hearing the conversation I started paying attention to see if my wife's vagina was stretched any from her girlfriend's toy. I haven't touched her since the night I overheard that conversation. I got COVID. I tested positive that very night and have slept in the guest room quarantining since. Matter of fact, I might have the record for testing positive. 3 weeks. Actually, I looked it up online, and that says in some cases I could be positive for a month, and with the pregnancy, it is just safer for me to sleep in another room. I grinned. I got some smiles and thumbs up. I stepped away from the podium. The group moderator, the therapist, stepped forward and thanked me for being honest and sharing. He asked me to continue to come to the open meetings as well as our private counseling sessions. I told him I would consider it. I might need to blow off more steam later, but for now, the lion was kept in its cage. I had only gone to him at my attorney's insistence. My lawyer said I was on the edge of losing it and needed a relief valve. Just making plans to divorce Ava was not enough to temper my anger. Unlike at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, these meetings ended with everybody having a drink. We all adjourned to the bar down the block. "So you haven't even told the wife you know she is cheating?" one guy asked incredulously. I shook my head. Damn, I blew up, slapped my wife down, and then chased the jerk out the door. Of coup, as she told me she was going out on a date with the guy when he walked in the door to pick her up. He was standing there grinning when she told me she was going out and probably would not be back until the next morning. If he wasn't so damn fast, I might have killed him. I was kicking in his car door trying to get to him when the cops arrived. That is why I am in these meetings, mandated by the court for anger management. "How about these other guys?" I asked. "Are they in the same boat?" The reason I ask is some seem to be getting off on hearing my story. I wonder if any are here for the prospects. The guy gave me a blank look and said, "Prospects?" "Yeah, you know, like the old joke. A teenager goes to confession and admits he had intimacy with a girl at school. The priest asks if it is Mary or something. The kids say no. The priest asks if it was Susie something. Again, no. The priest asks about a third girl, Joanne something. Again, no. So the priest tells the kid to say 10 Hail Marys. The kid steps outside and his friend who has been waiting asks him what the priest said. The first says, "He told me to say 10 Hail Marys and gave me 3 good prospects." The other guys at the table laughed. "You seem like a stand-up guy," one guy said. "If later you want somebody to do a little back-kicking while you are in church in front of a bunch of witnesses, let me know," I asked him, how he knew I was not a cop setting him up. "Because I work for your brother on occasion as a sheetrock subcontractor. I remember seeing you on the job a while back. You probably don't recognize me because I used to have a big beard and longer hair. Too noticeable if you know what I mean." I made a mental note to ask my brother for the guy's story sometime. I told him I was still just getting everything together like my lawyer advised. Then I'd have the cheating woman served and go from there. I limited myself to 2 beers. I was surprised at how much better I felt as I drove home. Maybe there really was something to that letting people, even total strangers, know your troubles crap. Confession or letting your demons out may be good for the soul, but I had work to get done. I was on a mission. Like I had told the guys at the meeting, my soon-to-be ex-wife had left for the week with her boss and the secretary, June. They planned to be gone the whole week to meet with some corporate clients. I suspected the work would be finished in 2 days. I knew it was a farce and knew what they intended long before I was told they might stay to visit the jazz festival on the company dime the next weekend. Ava was going to get comp time, so she'd have a few days off the following week if I could get away from my ledgers to spend some us time. More nonsense, I knew. She was just trying to keep me sexually sated and oblivious. 2 weeks later, I walked into the meeting room a little late. The others had taken their seats while the therapist was trying to get the meeting going by talking about how releasing your inner demons verbally was better than lashing out physically and risking criminal or civil consequences. I was not trying to make an entrance, but the room broke into cheers as soon as I stepped inside. "Glad to have you back, Gary. I know these guys want to hear the rest of the story from the man himself," my therapist announced. "Okay," I said, grinning, expressing a happiness I did not feel inside. I was, however, content for the moment. I stepped up to the podium. "A couple of weeks ago, I told you my tale of woe, about how my wife was cheating on me with her boss, possibly even pregnant by him. Not only that, but the legal secretary was also involved, and the three apparently enjoyed whenever they could. Well, today, I am going to tell you the rest of the story. When I related what I knew to you guys, I had not told the jerk's wife, nor the husband of the other cheating woman, anything I had found out. Not that they did not deserve to know, but I did not want them to overreact and blow my plans out of the water. I wanted to give my wife the intimacy of her life. Not sexually, because she would have enjoyed that. I waited until Thursday night of that week before telling either of the others what our spouses were doing while away. I apologized for my delay and explained why, then told them I was going to have Ava served at the airport upon their arrival back Sunday afternoon. I suggested they contact attorneys and gave them my lawyer's name. I asked them to not call or text their spouses and reveal they had been caught. After the initial shock wore off a bit, we started to talk. I found out, like in my case, that each of the cheaters called home every night to say how much they missed us and wished they were home. We all knew we were being fed a load of nonsense. At my urging, Janice, Doug's wife decided to take her kids to visit her sister and brother-in-law up in Alexandria. She was going to confide in them and have them come back and be with her when she confronted her husband upon his return. Apparently, this was not the first time he cheated. She has 2 teenage kids she had to contend with as well. Bill, the secretary's husband, could not get out of work for the weekend. He runs the maintenance department for the Ford dealership here in town. He did promise to not call his wife June. He said he wanted to choke her to death without witnesses. I told him about this group and how it helped me to subdue those same impulses. I got a bit of laughter. Anyway, I told both what I did with my finances and explained why. Removing half of our savings and checking account balances, etc. In my case, that was not much, but they each admitted to having a fair amount in their accounts. I told them I was not going to cancel my credit cards until the last minute, but would pay the bill out of the joint account to make sure my wife paid her half. I left them to stew on what they needed to do and went home. I'm sure you guys heard what I did at home, and it is all true. I got cheers and applause. I took a half bow. Yes, I spent the week dismantling my home. By dismantle, I mean I took it apart, but did not damage a single item. Some of you might remember from my earlier explanation, but I did most of the work renovating my house myself with a little of my brother's help. What I did was take back that work. I reversed it. I had to leave the sheetrock up with the texture and paint, but that, the carpet, and the air conditioning system was about all I left untouched. I disconnected every appliance and moved it away from the wall. The stove, dishwasher, and refrigerator were all unplugged, and even the connecting wiring harnesses were removed. Every bit of hardware was carefully bagged and attached to the appliance. I even took out the garbage disposal and left it in the middle of the kitchen floor with the sink and faucets all taken apart and removed. I decided to leave the kitchen cabinets. I could have taken them down and did take a few that the 2 of us could lift easily after loosening the retaining bolts. But that was just to show the soon-to-be ex her pretty kitchen was no more. I also left kitchen counters alone, as I had used a one-piece system that I could not take away from the wall without damage. That was not the case in the bathrooms. I drained and removed the toilets, took the vanities apart, again even took off the faucet handles. We even cleaned the edges of the vanities and sinks to remove plaster and caulk. When we were finished, it looked like a pile of used bathroom fixtures. Only a few bare pipes and cut-off valves poked out of the walls. The tub and shower stall was untouched, for the same reason I left the kitchen counters. Next, I took the bed and dresser apart as much as I could. The bed was easy, the mattress, box springs, and all came apart easily and were stacked in the hallway. All I could do with the dresser was to empty it. All my wife's clothes were put into our bedroom closet, which of course no longer had the pretty louvered doors. Our furniture looked nice and actually was very expensive, but like a lot of furniture nowadays is screwed together. We bought most of ours unassembled. I disassembled everything that originally came that way. My wife had not lifted a finger to help put them together. The shelving units lay in pieces on the floor. The credenza that held my booze and all my wife's little knickknacks was collapsed with all the hardware carefully bagged. I wanted to make sure nothing was damaged. The last things to remove were the ceiling fans and light fixtures from each room. The only thing I left was the chandelier in the dining room, but I took the light bulbs out of that. Oh yes, I removed every electrical switch and plug socket in the house. We capped the wires even though the electricity was off. I'd had to contract out for the air conditioning system to be installed, so I left that alone. I'd put in the water heater myself, but left it intact as well. Now you may be wondering what I did with all the stuff I took out of the cabinets, shelves, and off the walls. Well, I want none of that stuff as it would remind me of the cheating woman, so we spread it across the floor of the master bedroom. I mean, every dish and glass, every little figurine was placed carefully from the front of the closet to the door. You could not walk from the door to the closet without clearing a path first. Well, I take that back, as the door was not there anymore either. Nor were there any doors hanging except the exterior doors which I left in place for security. I explained before I am an accountant. Well, I kept a receipt for everything we bought to put into that house. My wife and I paid for it out of our communal assets, so I was going to give her back half of those appliances and fixtures. Just without the work, or what I called sweat equity, I had in the house. My wife had done virtually nothing to help except pick out the appliances and help plan the renovations. I'll want a few of the mobile appliances like a coffee pot and microwave and that sort of thing. It'll give my ex something else to argue about. I got some appreciative laughter. By the time her plane set down at the airport, everything in the house that I had assembled or installed had been taken apart. I got a call from the process server who handed her the divorce papers and sat back to wait for her to come home. June, the secretary had driven them to the airport in her van, so she dropped them off. My brother and I were waiting with a couple of the neighbors who wanted to see the rest of the show. They'd been watching me take apart the house all week and could testify where I had been and what I was doing. While waiting for the cheaters to get home, we had been consuming the contents of my liquor cabinet and eating the steaks from my freezer I'd kept back. All the rest of the food was taken to Ava's mother's house earlier in the week. I told her my freezer had gone out, but that did not explain all the canned goods and condiments I dropped off. The poor woman was too confused to ask what was going on. I knew she'd find out before long. June stuck around only long enough to let Ava and Doug out of the van. I wondered why Doug even came home with her. I walked around the front, leaving the others to watch from the side of the house, as Ava clambered out of the van followed by Doug, her lover. Both were fit to be tied. "Well," she was yelling, waving the envelope she had been given. He was angry, demanding to know what kind of lies I might have told his wife and saying he was going to bury me legally for casting aspersions on his character. I had filed for divorce on the basis of adultery and named him as one of the parties. As you all know, the courts do not really care about the reason for a divorce, but my claiming adultery put a new light on the problem. Or rather added a bit of embarrassment because it would be part of the public record. At about that same time, Doug's wife arrived with her sister. I knew Ava's time of arrival as I had been tracking her cell phone, so I'd given Janice a call they were on their way. Janice had already phoned me to tell me part of what she found when she returned home after her weekend away from home. She asked if I had been to her home that weekend. I told her truthfully, that I had been working hard at my own house and barely went anywhere else except to my brother's to sleep at night. Apparently, she could not park in her garage when she got home. The whole driveway was filled with car parts. Not just any car parts, but the pieces that had been her husband's beloved '65 Ford Mustang. It was his pride and joy, and he would show it off to every visitor to his house. The car had originally been his father's and was Doug's first car. It held great sentimental value. His father had put it into storage. Years later, Doug had the car totally restored. I'd heard people laugh and comment he loved that Mustang more than his wife and kids. That might have been an exaggeration, but not by much. Of course, Doug was a little upset to see his wife drive up, and he immediately began with a lame comment that whatever she might have heard was a total lie. She did not tell him what was awaiting him at home. All of us stood outside while my wife took her suitcase inside. Then came the scream from inside the house. Ava came to the door screaming, "What the hell did you do to my house?" I knew she did not have time to really check it out. All she saw was the stuff piled in the living room. I'm surprised she did not notice the blinds and drapes were missing before she even got inside. I guess she was a little off her game from being served at the airport. Every window was uncovered since one of the first things I had done was remove the blinds, dismantle them, and fold the drapes. Hey, when I turned off the electricity, the only light we had was from outside during the day or the lights from the generator we used. I stepped inside, followed by my brother and the rest of the entourage. I calmly informed my soon-to-be ex what I had done. I was preparing the house to split our assets 50-50. She demanded to know where her stuff was. I waved my hand around the floor and then told her if she was referring to her clothes and personal items, they were all safe and sound in the bedroom closet. When she went to look, she was not happy. I had never heard her issue such a shrill scream in all the years we had known each other. Somebody had called the police, and they showed up to listen to my wife scream and yell about how I demolished her home. I carefully explained what was going on to the first cop on the scene. He immediately called for his supervisor. I do not know exactly what he said, but within a minute at least, 3 more units showed up. I'd called my attorney when I knew Ava was on her way home, and he finally showed up. He apologized, saying he thought he better change clothes before he arrived. Ava began to rant about where she would go for the night and demanded I be arrested. My lawyer nixed that last idea, telling the police I had done nothing illegal. No crime had been committed, and this was a matter for civil court. Doug demanded his wife take him home, but Janice refused, and then she frowned at him and asked why he never looked at his phone. She had texted him a few hours before. He still did not look, thinking whatever she sent him had to do with his alleged cheating. Now this is conjecture on my part. What he told his wife was he was busy after Ava was served at the airport, and he would clear up any misconceptions about the business trips. At this point, I was trying to monitor 3 or 4 conversations at once. I did answer Ava when she asked what I had done with her car. She and Doug decided that she would drive him where he needed to go since his wife told him he could walk, as she was not about to let his cheating back get into her car. I told Ava very truthfully her car was exactly where she left it, in the garage. She stormed back inside the house. Not 2 minutes later, she stomped back outside and complained the garage door would not open. I told her I was not surprised as the electricity was off, plus I had dismantled the garage door opener. She loudly demanded to know how she was supposed to get her car out. Doug heard her and told her to just pull the emergency release to open the door. She had no idea what that was, so he went inside with her. They came back out, and he demanded to know where the handle for the release was. I shrugged and told him it was around somewhere, carefully marked like every other item I had taken apart. The police were taking notes the whole time, asking for statements from one and all. Then Janice dropped her bombshell that she had not called the police yet, but she had an issue at her home. She showed her cell phone to the police lieutenant who seemed to be in charge. I watched his face change to total incredulity. He looked at me. I told him Janice had shown me the photos, but I had been here at my own home all weekend and had multiple witnesses. Unable to get her car out, and with Janice refusing to take Doug home, they called June back. She arrived disheveled, having been crying. Her husband had met her outside their house with all her clothes stuffed into plastic garbage bags. He'd helped her load the bags into her van and told her to leave and not return until she saw her lawyer. He had told me his plans the day before. So now Ava and Doug put their suitcases into June's van. Janice told him once again he ought to look at his phone. He finally did, and then let out with a scream that almost matched those of Ava's. He yelled for June to get him home, fast. I'd given Janice a suggestion when she first called me to tell me what she found, and she had already acted on it. Her brother-in-law had stayed at her home. The cops were finished with what they could do at my house. We'd all given our statements, so my brother and I followed the rest to Doug's home. A television news van was already parked in front of his house. The reporter was interviewing Brett, the brother-in-law, about what the family found when they brought Janice home from her weekend away. Later, I found out the cameraman had already taken a full video of the area. The story Brett told was that they could not pull all the way around the house to park in the garage, as the garage doors and most of the drive were blocked with car parts. The garage was around the end of the house, and the area was totally obscured from street view. Nobody stopped me from following them up to the house. The scene was great. Most of you men have put together model cars when you were kids, I am sure. Well, what I saw looked just like what you see when you open a model box, with the exception of the plastic bars holding the little parts. In the center of the drive was a car chassis. To each side laid the doors. Behind the car on the drive was the trunk, and in front, the car hood. I was a little surprised the fenders had not been removed as well, nor had the windshield. Virtually every other piece was, though. The engine sat in front of the chassis. The radiator, fan, water pump, starter, generator, carburetor, and all the major parts had been removed. All the belts and hoses are placed neatly in rows to one side. The transmission and the whole drivetrain were sitting behind the car. The wheels were removed along with the brake assemblies. Even the seats were removed and sitting off to one side. I'm telling you, it was impressive. I'd never seen a car totally or almost totally taken apart. Everything was laid out very neatly. Not that any of that mattered. Doug lost it. He began to wail and even started crying. He dropped to his knees and screamed that Sally was destroyed. I asked Janice who was Sally. The television reporter was standing close by while the cops walked around the car looking over the scene. I can tell you I fell over laughing when Janice explained Doug named his car Sally. Mustang Sally, like the song. I know you all heard about that part. Once the news reporter broadcasted her report, the story was picked up by the network and then made the full rounds on social media. They played the song Mustang Sally as the backdrop. None of us spouses were hiding. We all made sure the three cheaters were named. Doug accused each of us for the damage to his car, but we all had ironclad alibis. June's husband, Bill, worked all day Saturday at the dealership and was with their kids that night and all day Sunday. He had the expertise to dismantle the car and possibly the resources, but the investigators could not link him to anybody who might have been responsible. Apart from Doug's, not a single fingerprint could be found on any part. The police had even checked the lug nuts that had been carefully piled together. Janice was with her sister and brother-in-law for the weekend, and even her kids testified to that. She loudly proclaimed she had not even thought of doing anything to the car, but if she had, it would have been with a hammer. And she was still considering using a hammer on the parts and finishing the job. Even the cops were laughing, hearing that. Of course, because of the careful way the car had been dismantled and the parts not damaged, I was the #1 suspect, but I also had an alibi. First of all, I am not a mechanic. I know home repair and renovation, not how a vehicle might be put together. I did not have much more than a couple of screwdrivers and a few wrenches anyway. Plus, I was busy taking apart my home under the amused and watchful eyes of my neighbors. The whole event at Doug's house was a circus. Ava was there because she had no other transportation other than June, who had been kicked out of her home by her husband. My father-in-law soon showed up after receiving a call from Ava. He stood wide-eyed watching the extravaganza unfold. The reporter called me for a follow-up the next day. She'd heard what I'd done to my home and wanted to add that as an angle to her story. I gave her one of the 20 or so flash drives I had made of how I systematically dismantled my home. She condensed 5 hours of video into a 2-minute television segment. Those flash drives proved to save my butt so far. I gave them out like candy at Halloween. Of course, since I only had 20 drives, I'd also included the evidence of the 3 culprits cheating. Doug had got a restraining order for me to not publish a thing about his infidelities. But by the time the order was issued, almost all of those drives had been distributed. I had no control when some of the evidence, which included them discussing their affair and even video of a few of their encounters, made the rounds on the internet. Even my father-in-law got a flash drive when he asked me if I might be overreacting to perceived events. Doug was totally embarrassed to be seen switching places with his 2 female partners. Him taking up the back by June's toy while he had his face planted in Ava's crotch was the most humiliating and was cut out of the television segments but did show up online. That the 3 were videoed in flagrante delicto was mentioned often, even on television. Now, as of today, my status is still up in the air. I intend to push for the divorce to be finalized as soon as possible, but Ava wants to stay married for the sake of the baby. The paternity test which my wife initially protested showed I am not the father of her unborn child. I had to pay extra to get the test expedited, but since the child is not mine, I'll get some of my money back from the communal assets. Ava wanted the opportunity to discuss the matter privately and wait until the baby was born to test, but I had made it so public that she had no option but to submit to the test despite her attorney's advice. I have no idea what she plans to do or if Doug will step forward. He might not even be the father for all I know. That is not my concern. My wife got an attorney who claimed I destroyed my home. Mine, of course, claimed I merely took back my work and none of the components were damaged and everything is ready for resale. From the last I heard, the investigation into who dismantled Doug's Mustang has come up empty. The working theory is it has to be a team of experienced mechanics, somebody with the expertise to remove the major components and not leave a total mess. Oil, transmission fluid, coolant, and even brake fluid were drained, and none of the parts were damaged when taken apart. Even Bill, June's husband, admitted to the investigators what it would take to take the car apart like that. Components that might be compromised, like the manifold covers and valve assemblies, were left alone. Bill told me privately he would like to hire the men as they were fast and obviously knew their stuff. He told me as much as he loved it, he had nothing to do with taking the Mustang apart and asked if I had. I honestly told him I had not. Doug paid through the nose to get the parts picked up and stored. Janice told him he had 2 days to remove the junk, as she called it, from her drive so she'd have access to her garage. Otherwise, she'd hire a couple of neighborhood boys to pile the crap under the carport where Doug had kept the car. He knew she was serious. Before any of you think I came out on top of any of this, I was not unscathed. The very next day after Ava's return home, I was immediately fired from my job. I knew my boss was a good friend of Doug. Doug sent him clients, and in turn, he recommended Doug when the need arose. My boss had even been the one to originally suggest Ava go to work for Doug. When I was told I was fired, I leaned over my boss's desk and asked him point blank if he had been party to any of the intimacy play, and more specifically, asked if he had been with my wife. He denied everything, but that did not keep me from having a little talk with his wife to make the suggestion I suspected he might have. My ex-boss's claim I was poaching clients was dismissed when I demonstrated I'd brought many of them to the firm in the first place. A few others made the statement they did not trust the man after he fired me. I've agreed to handle all the accounts who followed me pro bono for 2 months while I work for my brother for minimum wage. Ava's attorney claims I am deliberately avoiding having a substantial income. I claimed I was simply helping friends while I determined my future career. I opened my fledgling part-time pro bono accounting firm in an unused office in my brother's building. If any of you need an accountant, let me know. I got a few cheers from the audience. I felt a little better about my circumstances, but I had to admit, I lost a wife, my home, and my dreams. All irretrievable. 3 weeks later. Once again, I walked into the anger management support group. I stepped to the podium. I see many of the same faces here. I guess you are here for the same reason I am. It is hard to get control of your emotions. Well, let me rephrase. That it is hard to keep them under control all the time. As Mai and I am sure your therapists say, there is a fine line between depression and anger. I talk to both therapists now. To be honest, it was not my choice. I know some of you had to come here because the court mandated it. I am here because my sister-in-law demanded it. We were all sitting at the dinner table, and my 8-year-old nephew asked loudly, "Uncle Gary, are you angry all the time because Aunt Ava was so unpleasant?" When asked where he heard that, my nephew pointed at me and said he heard me talking to his dad. My sister-in-law looked at me to fix the situation, so I said very carefully that it was really not polite to use that word, but yes, I was very upset with Aunt Ava. Then I hit the trifecta of keywords when he said, "Okay, I won't say that again. I like her. It's too bad she acts this way." You can imagine the glares I got from my sister-in-law. My brother was no help at all. He just stared at his plate and shook as he tried to keep from laughing. My sister-in-law told me very quickly that if I wanted to keep my boys, I better learn to watch what I said around the kids. Now my 6-year-old niece got into it and said, "Boys? I didn't know Uncle Gary had any kids. Where are they?" My sister-in-law said the boys were me, her dad, and her brother. Then the little 6-year-old, bless her heart, said, "Oh, so when you told Miss Sandy your girls were sore and tender from too much rough play, you meant because I fell and skinned my knee when—" To be honest, I did not hear how she finished because I was laughing too hard. But my sister-in-law was beet red. Okay, long story short. If I want to live with my brother and his family, I continue my therapy, including these group sessions, I announced. I cannot afford to live on my own. Right now, I have no income. I wanted to decrease what I made for the divorce, but people do not realize how difficult it is to even find an apartment without verifiable income. My sister-in-law is a lovely woman and generous to a fault. She just does not want her kids influenced negatively by my misfortunes. More keywords to go along with those others I mentioned. So where are we, apart from my getting my sister-in-law upset about what her kids were picking up while listening to my conversations? Over the last 3 weeks, I have done the minimum as regards making an income. I had only made marginally more than Ava had before I was fired. I personally felt she was paid so much because she was providing her boss with extra services. Of course, my lawyer told me to keep my mouth shut about that, as our minuscule difference in income means I wouldn't pay alimony. He told me not to mess that up. Janice kicked Doug out and filed for divorce. His beloved car, Sally, is somewhere in storage. Their divorce, as you might imagine, is already messy. She told me in no uncertain terms she was looking for any way to flay the bastard's meat off his bones. I know she meant that metaphorically, but I hope I am never called to testify if something physical happens to the man. Doug is having some major troubles at work. Most of his work is with the corporate clients. Somebody has put the bug out that possibly some of his negotiations may have been sweetened by sexual favors from Ava and June. All three adamantly deny that, of course, but apparently some clients are taking the possibility seriously and are taking business elsewhere. The firm in general has had some problems with other areas as well. They have been handling sexual discrimination and harassment cases. Some of those clients have changed attorneys and filed grievances to the bar, saying the firm cannot handle their own internal affairs when it comes to intimacy in the workplace. I understand Doug's continued presence is more of a liability than an asset, and he is close to being asked to leave. His situation at work has been made worse by the number of people driving past his office playing Mustang Sally by Wilson Pickett at full volume. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy? I hate it for him. Not. While I like the idea he may be out on his ear, Ava's income may take a nosedive. Her income is very high compared to the average salary for paralegals, especially with her short time in the field. Again, There have been aspersions that part of her pay is for her sexual services. The same has been said about the secretary, June. Of the 3 cheaters, June is the only one who might keep her marriage intact. She is trying her best to reconcile. She told her husband she loved screwing others with her toy. She just liked the power she felt. She claimed she never allowed Doug to have intimacy with her. She also claimed Ava was submissive and would go down on her upon command, and June loved to exercise that power as well. She admitted that while mostly it was one-sided, she did enjoy a little private girl-on-girl action on occasion. She is playing the child custody card as hard as she can. Bill told me he is considering keeping their marriage intact if she'd agreed to a post-nup agreement. She has convinced him the intimacy with clients rumor is false. My marriage, on the other hand, is over. I wouldn't keep her if the baby was mine. All we need to do is split the assets. The judges, and I use that term in the plural since Ava appealed the original decision, declared I was justified in taking back my own sweat equity in my former home. I had not damaged any component but merely uninstalled them and left them ready for reinstallation or sale. I gave Ava possession of everything I had placed in our bedroom, but she had to pay the bill to pack and remove it all immediately, or I would consider it community property. Her father helped her pay and coordinate that. I wanted the stuff out of the house quickly, but refused to lift a finger to help. Ava tried to get me to help so we could talk. I refused to talk to her without my lawyer present. My sister-in-law went to observe and make sure Ava only took the stuff from the bedroom. My soon-to-be ex-father-in-law finally viewed the files I gave him and told me privately he understood my actions, but was still obligated to take care of his daughter. I think Ava moved back into her old room at their house. At our first joint meeting with our attorneys, as part of the separation of assets, I suggested Ava take her half of the household fixtures and appliances. She could pick out what she would want and I'd take something of similar value. She glared at me when I told her I'd give her first choice of toilets. She wanted to buy out my half for face value, saying she would hire a crew to put it all back together. I knew what she and her lawyer were thinking. The whole was worth much more than the sum of the parts. As an accountant, I also knew how much I could afford to offer her and still be below the break-even point. I kept offering more than her as a counter. She could not get the financing anyway. I could not have on my own either, but my brother was backing my play financially. Ava refused to sell to me for any reason. Her attorney eventually demanded everything be sold at public auction and the proceeds split. My attorney argued weakly we would lose too much. He lost that decision, which did not bother him or me. Ava had tried but could not find a buyer offering near as much as I had offered. My brother originally offered to buy the shell of a house for half what my ex and I had invested but was refused. At auction, he finally got it for 70%. The house was in great shape, but few of the investors were willing to outbid my brother. I'm sure several of those investors were interested but knew my brother would never work for them again, and other people in the trades would have followed suit. Ava's lawyer protested his client's lack of compensation briefly, but had to concede the auction was his client's demand, and they had unfortunately refused my much higher offer. So basically, I lost my back, settling my divorce. Unemployed and with only a small percent of my assets left, I am still living in my brother's guest room. To compensate him for my rent, I began work to restore my old house. Everybody knows I was the one who took my home apart, but nobody has any idea of who dismantled Doug's beloved Mustang, let alone begin to provide a bit of proof. Doug even hired his own investigators. All have come up dry. My financials were examined to see if I had paid anyone. I had to provide them access to my cell phone and computer. June's husband Bill did also. No link to anybody who might have done the deed has been found. The whole affair has been fodder on social media after originally appearing as a topic on network television. You can imagine the notoriety I get as the man who took my house apart. I am constantly asked how I really took the Mustang apart and promised they'd never tell. Then I get congratulated for something I did not do. Several of the guys stood and congratulated me on the spot to the laughter of others. I stepped away from the podium. The therapist asked who wanted to go next. All shook their heads. One guy said he'd wait for next time to tell how he grabbed the guy messing with his wife by the balls and marched him naked out of his house and down the street. We all headed for the bar. "Hey, Gary, don't I rate a little discount as a new client?" Paul Frug asked. He was the drywall subcontractor I'd met. "I seem to remember you gave the guys who followed you when you got fired from that other firm 2 months of free accounting." "Hell, I gave you a free setup in my system," I offered with a smile. "That takes some time. Do you think you deserve more? You do work for my brother, not me. My house already has all the walls up." I was referring to my former house, which my brother now owned and rented to me for a minimal amount. I'd be buying that house back for what my brother paid for it in a year or so when we figured enough time had passed. My ex-wife Ava could not claim fraud. "Or is it because I offered all the guys in our group a discount to do their taxes this year?" I asked. "Nope, none of those things." Paul grinned. "I figure I deserve it for my strength pressing on a floor jack to lift a Mustang up so the wheels and tranny could be removed. I'm not much of a mechanic, but I can stack parts around. Also for telling your brother, I knew some guys who could help out in a bad situation, and especially my cousin who is a mechanic when he told me about a Mustang he wanted dismantled." I almost could not see through tears of laughter as I marked his account paid in full for the next year. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.